Hello everyone, playing a little bit of Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Out and about today for a new video I'd like to do in, effectively, scary stories and gameplay, where I tell scary stories I've heard or people have sent me while I play. Alrighty then, like, share, and subscribe, and let's get started, shall we? This particular story comes from a friend of the family. They sent it to me in writing, as I generally request when I know the individual in question. Although, if anyone is interested, they can leave it in the comments section. Ideally with some sort of evidence, such as a newspaper clipping, a digital picture of it, or such. Story begins in the Carolinas. My favorite place on earth. Alrighty then. Title of the story is Dogman of the Carolinas. I'm sending this written document to you, as you requested, in order to read it to your audience. The date in question was effectively about 15 years ago, when me and my friends would go hunting out deep as we could. Unfortunately, this year we decided to get even bolder. We've been hearing stories from locals that somewhere towards the mountains, around Transylvania County, there was what many were referring to as a dogman. We immediately took great interest in this and decided, well, we've spent most of our lives out in the woods. Perhaps we can track this thing down and bring it home. Or at the very least, a bit of evidence. So we decided to start arranging things. Everyone get tickets, get their schedules cleaned up to go. We had plans in motion, as we were planning to go out fully loaded to stay out for up to 6 months. Not all of us would be able to stay the full time, but a number of us would, about half of us. About 12 in total were going to head out. We all began to discuss what we might want to bring. I particularly have some experience with large game hunting, and from the stories I could find, it would be effectively a 7-foot tall, 400-pound creature of a carnivorous variety. Not wanting to take chances, I knew at about 200-yard range I'd want one of my favorite rifles, a .308 I normally carry with me whenever I head out. Most sightings are 200 yards and less, so that would be sufficient for a 400-pound animal such as a bear. However, not taking any chances, I'd be taking 2 pistols out as I normally do. One for self-defense, and another one intended as a rather large and capable revolver that I could use in place of my rifle at shorter ranges. We decided that we would be headed out the first chance we got, when everyone had their supplies up and ready. These supplies in question we were bringing tended to be just a large amount of food, an ability to purify water while we were out there, along with the little water we were taking with us. We knew the general area, so we knew there was creeks we could take water from and purify for our use, so we didn't feel too particularly worried. And with our tents all squared away, we decided that we had enough to go. day comes when effectively we're all sitting outdoors discussing what we intend to bring with us. I told him I was going to bring my standard 308 rifle and my 2 handguns, my rather large revolver, and my standard semi-auto pistol I use for personal protection. A lot of my friends scoffed as they said, why would I need to bring 3 separate weapons with me? And I proceeded to explain that effectively we would be dealing with a 400 or 500 pound, rather agitated predator, and I was not a fan of that. So, despite people joking that I was going to be Rambo out in the woods way, trying to deal with the creature in question, as many of them were just taking their standard deer rifle out, mostly in smaller calibers, such as .243, a still capable cartridge. However, in my opinion, ill-suited to dealing with a 400 or 500 pound predator, potentially larger. On the way there, we decided to pick up some extra supplies and ask the locals what exactly they'd been seeing. The story we were getting was there was a creature they believed to be a dog man systematically killing everyone's hunting dogs in the area and targeting livestock that people may own. It tended, whenever people were to go after it, disappear into the more rugged terrain, and no one was quite brave enough to go after it in there. There's plenty of creeks, little ravines, a lot of brush and dense tree lines that would easily get someone lost. Being lost with a rather large predator out and about, no one particularly cared for that notion. So after gathering a little intelligence, we began to head out to where we were going to park our cars and then make our way out. It'd take us about 10 hours to get to where we were going on foot, and we left vehicles with someone we felt we could trust. So we made our way to the ideal camping spot. Along the way, several of us began to feel like we were being watched, first by the locals and then by an animal that was seemingly following us as we got deeper into the brush. We brushed it off as just being standard fare. However, some members of the group were getting worried. We decided to kind of just push it off and ignore it for the time and just managed to get to the spot before dark, which we were just barely able to do. We set up camp, started a fire, and began discussing what we intended for the next day. The next day, we had been planning, when we first were headed into the woods, simply to start scouting the area and setting traps for those of us who had the appropriate documentation to bring traps. Of course, we were bringing large bear traps, or just things that could be used to delay a large predator, homemade snares and the like. On top of that, we were going to set up stands to watch from and cameras all over. However, upon arriving, we decided that a different route would be needed to be taken. We would set up the cameras around the base that we had essentially set up, and we would move on from there and ignore the traps. That night, we'd all shut up and gone to bed. after everyone had enjoyed a rather nice dinner around the campfire and we finished our discussion. So, night, I heard something moving around the campfire. Rather large, and I peeked out my tent to see nothing. As I began to pull tent zipper open, it darted off into the tree line. So, a lot of us decided that it would be more advantageous to have someone stand up watch, as I was not the only person that heard that, and had exited the tent to investigate. The rest of the night was fairly uneventful, watching in pairs. However, we aren't even first few days in and we started seeing activity. A large predator had clearly been moving around the area. We found corpses around various wildlife, and we were starting to get worried, because a lot of it was trailing off into the heavier brush where we did not want to go ourselves. We had already moved so far away from civilization that we were concerned that if something were to happen, things would not go very well. After the day of searching, we came back to our encampment only to find a fresh deer carcass in the middle of the encampment, and half the tents tore up. So, after a collective freakout, we decided to half of us head out of the woods, while the other half would remain, as they were the only people with tents left for a day, to collect the cameras, spend one last night, and then head home. I got picked to stay and collect cameras and go home the next day. Wasn't particularly thrilled, but gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. And I wasn't going to ask anyone else to do that for me, as a lot of the cameras in question were mine, that I had loaned to our little expedition. So, that night, after we spent the day collecting cameras, we had a fairly nice dinner. We decided to head on to bed. However, we heard unfortunate noise coming from the woodsway. A howl. At first it was at a distance, but then the howl started getting closer and closer, periodically howling again and again. Then it got close enough to hear growling. We proceeded to huddle around the campfire as the growling came from the bushes around the encampment. So, I pulled out my rifle, which had been sitting in a bag just behind the makeshift seat I'd set up behind where I was around the campfire. I decided it was about time I chucked some glow sticks close to where we heard the growling from. That's when I saw the eyes. Doing so only seemingly greatly enraged whatever was there. So, I proceeded to take aim. The creature in question, with a rather large dog head, decided to stand up on its hind legs and start approaching the campfire. I took aim and fired. Nothing. I fired again. Nothing. I emptied what was left of the rounds in my rifle. It just stared rather angrily, snarling more. It stepped forward. So, I decided to stop playing around, and I pulled out my revolver. And I put 4 rounds of 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum into it. A cartridge intended for Bear. That clearly got its attention as it proceeded to run off into the woods. Unfortunately for me, it meant I had to reload. And as I started to reload, I heard it coming back. This time I pulled my other pistol and unloaded. That finally drove the beast away. Next day, we made it home as fast as we could and informed our friends of our stay and what had happened. So we decided to eventually launch another expedition someday. Alright, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for your time, and see you around.